All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We've got an exciting topic that we're going to cover. Thriving with AI, building a strategy. So glad to have you join us. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. We will be sharing the recording of this webinar after it is done. We will not be sharing the actual presentation materials itself, but we will be providing the recording. During today's session, we are going to be taking question and answer. So if you look at the bottom of the screen, you do have the Q&A function. Feel free to post your questions in there. We will try to answer those as we go. And then we will also have a time of Q&A at the end of the webinar today. Today's webinar is the second in a three-part series. So if you've not seen the first webinar, there will be a follow-up email that will come out that will give you a link that you can go see the first webinar in this series. And then, of course, stay tuned for the third one that's coming. Good morning. My name is Mark Spock. I am a senior manager with Raymond Technology Solutions. And along with me today, I've got Jessica Dory and Jim Karp, both principals within Raymond as well. Very excited topic today. Really what we're going to cover is really just artificial intelligence as at a high level from an overview perspective. We're going to talk about some risks. We're going to talk about how do you build your roadmap? How do you get started in this process to effectively use AI in your business? And then we'll wrap up with some Q&A at the end. So, Jim?
Hey, good morning and welcome. A lot of people have addressed concerns. They're basically saying, hey, what about AI? How's it going to impact us and all these different things? So we found a couple different quotes here. They're both pretty similar, but the gist behind it is that AI is not necessarily going to replace you, but maybe your competitors that are leveraging AI can. And so that's the crux behind it is we want to stay current and jump into the pool here real quick. And, a lot of times people talk about the first mover advantage and, getting out there and doing things. And in our opinion, you need to start today, and you can get started today. And we'll show you how with this roadmap from that vantage point as we go through this today. But as time goes on, as people are using the generative AI, the playing field is going to level out and be even. And then you're going to need to be able to move beyond that. So it doesn't hurt to have that first mover advantage. You can become much more productive as a result of it. But at the end of the game, you're going to have to keep moving and keep moving forward as you go forward. So Mark indicated that this is the second series. We did go into a lot of in-depth about artificial intelligence last time. So for this presentation, we're just going to do a couple slides here real quick in case you haven't seen it before to make sure that we all have the same frame of reference. Artificial intelligence was coined back in the late 50s. There's been a lot of progression with it, and basically it's kind of a catch-all term, and there's a lot of items that are underneath it. So we're going to cover basically three items here today. And the first one is narrow AI. And basically narrow AI can do a lot of things that the humans can, but it's specifically targeted and built to do one particular task. Alexa, Siri, Netflix, when you have Netflix and it suggests having another program that's similar to the other program, that's kind of narrow AI. As opposed to general AI, basically can mimic the human reasoning, planning, and thinking from that vantage point. Now, it can't replace us. We're not there yet, but we're getting closer. And a great example of that is the autonomous vehicle. Stoplights, going, if a child's playing with the ball and it's bouncing in front of the car, is it going to stop? Those are the types of things that have been developed so far from that vantage point. So we've got narrow and general. And then we talked a lot last time about the generative AI. And now, for example, that's ChatGPT. It could be Copilot. It could be Gemini. There's all types out there. I believe there's close to 30 right now. There's Alpaca, there's Llama, there's Orca, there's Jasper. So there's a lot of them out there. And actually, we'll be covering a lot of those in our third webinar and discussing some of the pros and cons associated with it. But in either case, really generative AI is to be creative and be able to create something that hasn't been existed before. It could be maybe creating a picture, creating text. I know a lot of people are probably already playing with the generative AI. So kind of capsulizing these three things here real quick. You can think of general AI as the Swiss Army knife. It's got a lot of capabilities and it's not designed for one particular purpose, but it's designed to do mimic some of the reasoning to an extent. Whereas narrow AI is more like a specialized tool. In this case, it's like dental tools that we've got right there. And then we have the wizard down at the far end for the generative AI. So those are the different aspects. Now, I participated in a meeting just a while ago, let's say a month ago, McKinsey & Company. They're a premier organization, probably the top of all of the management consulting companies. And they basically stated in the webinar that they believe that 50% of the activities in your organization today can be mechanized through generative AI. Now, that may not be just from ChatGPT alone. Now, we didn't go through large language models and all the different aspects of everything, but the general context is over the next couple of years, as everything starts to build out, there's a lot of activities that are being done today that can be leveraged by generative AI. So with that, what we're going to do now is we're going to switch a little bit and start talking about some of the risks, because as you go into the generative AI, there's risks associated with it. And with that, we're going to turn it over to Jessica Doran. Jessica, take it away.
Thanks, Jim. Good morning, everyone. So we're going to start here by going back a little bit in time. Stuxnet. So Stuxnet was a malicious computer worm first uncovered in 2010. So like I said, going back in time here. And it was thought that it actually was in development since 2005. So think about how long Stuxnet took from that perspective. So the point of kind of starting with this is back years ago, it took a long time to develop these attacks and computer worms and viruses and everything along those lines. With today's technology and AI today, it takes far less time to craft these attacks. And, given the amount of, given time and energy, if someone wants to get into an organization, they're going to get in. But in today's world, it takes far less time to be able to crack into organizations than it did back then. Some of the AI threats we're going to talk about here. So phishing, again, not a new subject. We've been talking about phishing for years, but it truly has evolved given all of the technology and AI that's out there. Deep fakes, those have been around for a few years as well. But again, the AI helps with those. We're going to show some examples of those. And then the malware too, that's created using AI. So we're going to talk through these here. So starting off with phishing, like I said, not a new topic for anyone. But what I will say is you think back years ago, and the phishing emails were a lot easier to recognize, right? So there was the mistakes in them. There was the improper grammar, all of those things. The Nigerian prince scam here, we have, they use these. And back then, there was a lot of things where you could pick up on, these things that were included in these emails where it was like, that's a fish, we can tell. Well, today's technology and using AI to craft these makes it very difficult to pick up on, small things like that, because they have gotten so good at crafting these emails to make them look legitimate and to make them, really seem that they're coming from a legitimate source. So information seekers have really changed the game. So what the bad guys want to do is they want to gain that access. So they want to get into your organization. A lot of times they're going to use phishing to be able to do that, gain that initial access. Then they're going to work once they're inside to build that context, know your pattern of writing. They're going to be able to essentially watch you, see how you're writing, how you phrase things, how you, what you've got going on, everything that, current events, all of that. Then they're going to build that convincing content. And then once they have that, again, they're trying to mimic what you actually are writing, like what you're doing, tying it to things that you have going in your life. And then they're going to use that, and then they're going to strike. And that's how it makes these things so believable. And that's why so many people fall for these phishing attempts, because these bad guys truly make them very believable. So some of the simple steps to protect yourself, check the sender's email address. So those phishing emails, they often come from email addresses that don't actually match the company or the sender that they're appearing to. So pay attention to where those emails are actually coming from. Look for those generic greetings. So a lot of times they'll just say, hello, good morning, things like that. Pay attention for those generic greetings, because those are a sign that you can tell that it could be a potential phishing email. Examine the email's language. So I said, we're using AI, we're using technology to do, spell checks and make sure you've got it grammatically correct and everything like that. But there still is some, emails that we see every day that have that poor grammar and stuff in there. So again, pay attention to that. Be aware of those urgent requests. These bad guys always want to try to get you to do something very quickly. So it's saying they're going to lock out your account, that you got to update your payment details to make sure that your account doesn't become suspended, things like that. They want you to take action, and they want you to take action very quickly. Hover over those links. So when you do get these emails, before clicking on any of the links in the email, make sure you hover over them to see where they're actually going. Make sure that is then actually tied to where it's supposed to be going. I always say, don't click on a link that's in an email. Just if you're getting an email from an organization, just actually then go out, open your browser, and go to the actual web address of the organization that it appears that it's coming from, as opposed to clicking on any links that are in those emails. So now we're going to talk about some of these deep fakes that are out there. You guys have probably seen these. We've got an example here coming up as well too, but deep fake audio. So it's a type of synthetic media that uses artificial intelligence to generate recordings of you saying things you never actually said. So they take the recordings of you and then they piece it together and essentially make it sound and have you saying things that you never actually said by using that. Voice cloning, it's a technique that uses algorithms to create a voice that sounds just like a real person. So that's, again, very, very tricky. So when you've got individuals calling you, requesting things, be very careful, because the technology today can clone these voices and can take your voice and then piece it together to be able to make it seem like you're saying things that you never actually did. The voice phishing, very similar to the email phishing, but this is done over the phone. So it's a social engineering attack that someone's going to try and contact you over the phone and get you to give out sensitive information over the phone, or potentially try to lure you to go to a website that they're instructing you over the phone to go to. Again, you get these calls from people, be very, very cautious. What I always say is ask the person for their name and number and you'll give them a call back, right? Most of the time, they're just going to hang up at that point. Deep fake video, again, synthetic media, where a person's image is swapped with another person's image using AI. They're really created to make the manipulated content appear authentic. So again, be very cautious in what you're actually seeing out there. So now we're going to go through this example here of Morgan. Jim, you need to come off mute.
Would you believe me? What is your perception of reality? Is it the ability to capture, process, and make sense of the information our senses receive? If you can see, hear, taste, or smell something, does that make it real? Or is it simply the ability to feel? I would like to welcome you to the era of synthetic reality. Now, what do you see?
Isn't that amazing? So not Morgan Freeman. Definitely looks like Morgan Freeman, but again, it's that utilizing the technology and the AI out there to be able to create that. Microsoft actually has an AI program that can clone your voice from a 3-second audio clip. So think about that, right? Most of us have our voices recorded in our voicemails. Very easily for people to get that, to get a 3-second audio clip. So they can clone your voice and then essentially use that to be able to trick people into thinking that you're actually contacting them when it is actually not. Deepface Lab, available on everyone's cell phone these days, can actually take 2 pictures and essentially swap them from a face perspective. So again, be very cautious about what's out there, because people can easily get access to this technology, be able to swap pictures, be able to swap faces, and then essentially utilize them into tricking people from that perspective. So again, be very cautious about what's out there. President Biden actually issued the US's first executive order on artificial intelligence, and it requires watermarking of synthetic content created for government use. This was really kind of that first order on AI, because there is so much that's being done out there from an AI perspective. Again, we're going to see more and more of this as we continue, to evolve, and AI continues to grow in use from that perspective. AI's impact on malware. So it definitely can, and has been a critical component of cybersecurity, including threat detection, prevention, and response. We can utilize AI to be able to help us to identify those threats and those malicious activities that are happening out there from that perspective. But also, AI is used to power malware as well too. So it can be an aid for those bad guys in spreading that malware used in the cyber attacks. Automating malware creation, it's being used by the attackers out there to automate the process of launching those phishing attacks, as well as other malware too. It really allows those bad guys, like I said, think back, took, the bad guys with Stuxnet 5 years in creating that worm to be able to launch that attack. Now in today's world, it can take a whole lot less time to be able to create this malware that's out there. So also threat severity as well too. You can high severity malware threats can lead to stolen data, loss of customer trust, and damage. They're really taking advantage of the work from home trend as well too, to target remote workers and their company data. So again, we can utilize AI for the good in enhancing our cybersecurity, but we also know that the bad guys are also using it out there to try to launch those cyber attacks. So that's where we need to be on very cautious alert. So IBM's DeepLocker sniper attack. With this, these bad guys essentially are utilizing AI, and with IBM's DeepLocker, it really shows how artificial intelligence can be harnessed for cyber attacks. What it does is it uses AI to conceal malware within benign looking software applications. So it remains undetected until it identifies its specific target. So this is where that sniper attack comes in. It essentially then is going to identify the target through a trigger, such as facial recognition, geolocation, things like that. Once the AI identifies the target, then it launches. So think about that sniper attack, right? It's using AI to find that very specific target that it's looking for, and then it's going to attack, and then it's going to strike. So think about how powerful that is in today's world, where we're essentially, having this technology that can actually go and can identify a target using that recognition from a face perspective and then launch that attack. Very powerful technology. Midnight Blizzard. This was an attack on Microsoft Teams that showcased really the utilization of AI to carry out social engineering attacks. So what it did is it exploited AI to enhance phishing campaigns by creating these lures sent to Microsoft Teams, or sent via Microsoft Teams. And what they were designed to do was steal credentials by convincing the targets to approve fraudulent multi-factor authentication prompts. So for those of you who utilize multi-factor authentication, which I hope is everyone, you get the prompts, right, where it's asking you to essentially verify your identity from that perspective. They utilize this and utilize Microsoft Teams to be able to convince these users to click on these fraudulent attacks. So again, be very cautious if you're getting attempts or things that are you didn't essentially have prompt for the multi-factor. Be very cautious in that. Don't just click on it and say approve and everything along those lines, because that's going to essentially let those bad guys in. So now we're going to talk through what can you guys do to make sure that you're properly protected. So back to the basics, we say, right? Training, make sure your employees are trained. We say too, just slow down. Everyone is so busy in today's environment and world, and it seems like everyone's just clicking through emails and running through transactions and everything like that. Take the time to look at emails. Take the time to just stop and think, from that perspective. So, making sure that, again, the employees have the right training. Also, make sure you have the appropriate skill sets and tools in place, and make sure you keep your systems up to date as well too. Here, humans are our weakest link. We know that, right? So that goes to our training. We got to make sure that we're training these employees on what to look for, how to recognize these attempts so that they're not the ones falling victim to these attempts that are happening out there. So security tips before moving to AI. We're going to have a document that we're going to share with you as well. But these are some of the things that you should consider really kind of more before you jump into AI from that perspective. Have the cybersecurity assessment done. Make sure your environment is as secure as possible from that perspective. User access controls. Make sure you have access set appropriately so that, again, going back to least privilege, make sure the users have only the access they need from that perspective to do and carry out their job function. AI model security, make sure you've tested the model and that it's secure. That training and awareness is so important. Make sure that your employees are trained, that they're aware, that they're also aware of the proper uses of AI within your organization. Again, making sure everything that they're up to date and kept current on all those attacks and what it is and what it is not allowed for. Continuous monitoring, making sure that you're monitoring the platform as well too for malicious attempts, things along those lines. So again, like I said, we're going to share a document with you that's going to have a number of security tips in it. Hopefully you guys will take those back to your organization and work through implementing those in your organization. So how can AI help you? It can help from a threat detection and response perspective. It can help respond to those cyber threats in real time. It can help protect sensitive data within your organization. It can automate those routine tasks. So that really can help free up your team to work on more complex issues. It can also be used to provide cyber training, and it can be used in the event of a cyber incident as well too, that can help identify the root cause from that perspective. It can enhance cybersecurity. It's not a silver bullet by any means though. So again, utilizing it to your best ability to enhance your cybersecurity measures is the best way. Endpoint detection and response is a great example of this. It monitors your end user devices. So essentially your mobile phones, laptops, those types of things, and responds to those cyber threats. So right here, you've got continuous monitoring included in that, threat detection, incident response, integration with threat intelligence, managed threat hunting, real-time and historical visibility as well too. EDR, we recommend to all of our clients, have this in place. It really does enhance and help your cyber team make sure that they are responding to the appropriate threats and that those threats are getting identified in your environment. So great way of how AI can help us in enhancing our cybersecurity. Turn it over to Mark.
Actually, I'm going to jump in here, Jessica. Here,
Go ahead.
So, we spent a lot of time just now on security and cybersecurity, and that's because we really believe in building your roadmap. The first thing you really need to do is make sure that you're secure before you get out there and try to do things. Now, we've had a lot of dialogues with clients over the last year, and most people, they're real excited about artificial intelligence and they want to start right at the top. But we kind of view this, and I'm going to go through this really quick. We went through this in the last seminar as well. But I want to give you the perspective is that where you really need to start is with the data. If you have your control of your data, you understand the data, it's appropriate, the way that everything's put together, then you can effectively move up the chain and really leverage artificial intelligence. So now we talked a little bit about general AI as well as narrow AI, and then the generative AI. So this isn't really going to focus on the generative right now because you can start generative right now today. But if you want to get into the narrow or the general AI, here's the steps that we'd recommend. You want to start first pretty much with a business intelligence approach. Once you have control of your data, to really look at the descriptive capabilities as well as the diagnostic. And descriptive is basically answering the question, what happened? Diagnostic answers the question, why did it happen? And typically you're going to use your own data, and we'll call that the small data. And then if based on that, as you move up the maturity model, if you want to get into the predictive as well as the prescriptive analytics, and again, predictive is where are things going, and prescriptive is what do you want to do about it, then you start using the big data, the machine learning, the deep learning, and those different types of capabilities. And it takes a lot to get there. So what we're basically saying is start right here at the base and then start moving up. And as the models mature and as more products come out in the marketplace, things will get a little bit better for you. Now, here's an example right here. Let's go back right here to the challenge. And this is the wall of complexity. So in April of 2023, this was first put out by FirstMark. And basically, this is all of the software in April of 23 that's out there to assist everybody. And unfortunately, for a lot of organizations, if you want to do the business intelligence, the analytics, and then get into the AI, you have to use bubble gum, chewing gum, Band-Aids, chicken wire to put it all together because all these different components are out there, which makes it very difficult. So basically what we've decided to do is kind of look at the big picture and say, okay, how do you get started? And I'll cover this really quick. Then Mark and I are going to tag team with a little bit more of detail. First, our recommendation for a roadmap is to understand your objectives. And once you can understand what you really want to accomplish, we'll get into the detail for that. Then what you can do is understand your current environment. From there, you can build out a whole bunch of different capabilities. For example, AI policy, data management, data governance. Now, a lot of people don't get real excited about that, but that's a lot of stuff you need to have in place. That's where a lot of the security is going to fit in for you. Then eventually what you have to do is then in the third step is look at everything and say, okay, what are all the different opportunities we got? How do we prioritize them? What's the best place to get started? Then we naturally build. And from there, we go ahead and get started. So Mark, why don't you go through the first one?
Yeah, absolutely. So really it kind of starts with identifying what is the goal that you're trying to achieve. Where do you feel that AI could be a benefit to your organization? There are a lot of really neat uses for AI that you could leverage. You think about chatbots or interactive technology where you could improve customer service. Maybe you might have, some automation that you want to improve internally. Crunching of data. There's a lot of really neat uses. So I think it really starts with understanding maybe what are the pain points or what are maybe the edges that you'd like to improve and identifying what that objective and what that goal is going to be so that you kind of have a very narrow focus of where you want to go. And then at that point, it's really how do we add that value, right? How do we ensure that AI is going to improve the overall customer experience or improve the day-to-day operation of your business, right? We want to make sure that we're getting the return on the investment if we're gonna do this, and we want to make sure that AI, whatever that objective is, it's going to be well aligned within the business. So from a strategic perspective, as you're sitting down thinking about the future, thinking about where the organization's going to go, how you're going to grow, the different maybe lines of service or things that you want to provide to your customer, making sure that those things are nicely integrated together. And then ultimately at the tail end of this, your business is going to continue to grow, right? You're going to continue to expand. You want to make sure that what you implement and how you're doing it is going to continue to scale and be flexible to grow with the needs of the organization as well. Jim, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah. So after you do that, then let's look at the current environment. And one of the first things you really need to do is look at the crown jewels. And this goes back to getting control of your data. Understand what information is important to you, what do you need to protect, and what can you share, what should go into models, what should not go into models. And then secondly is understand your existing infrastructure. That's going to be your hardware, your network, get a good feel for where you stand today. And then also capabilities. What skill sets do you have within your organization? As we talked about the machine learning, the deep learning, the large language models, do you have the skill set to do that? If you don't, there's always a make versus buy type of decision that you can get into. It's still kind of early for the purchasing aspects, but there are a lot of vendors that are out there. And then also you have to look at it from, Mark kind of touched on it as well, evaluating your investment, time, the talent, the resources, the funding, making sure that you get the appropriate return. So after that, you go back to doing the policy. So Mark, what are you thinking?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is an area where I think most organizations, are going to need to catch up just a little bit. So AI has been out there now. When you think of like the Chat GPTs, the Copilots, Bing, there's been a number of interactive sites that are available for your users to directly interface with. And so really, I think many organizations do need to kind of get their arms around establishing a corporate policy and making sure that they have a good understanding of what that technology can do and the kind of access that their users do have. So making sure that we get a good governance strategy in place around the use of AI, especially for many of the organizations that may have sensitive information internally. We want to make sure that we're not sharing that sensitive information into the public space. So making sure that we're educating, training our users about the capabilities of the technology is very important. So establishing, really establishing that guideline and then training the users is going to be very, very important. Then really the next step of that is, again, getting those robust data management strategies in place. So if you've heard the old adage, garbage in, garbage out, it's going to be very important that as you continue to move forward, that your data remains clean. And so we want to make sure that the quality, the security, the accessibility of that data, and that's one of the challenges that many organizations now don't necessarily have all of their data internal to their organization. Many of them are leveraging cloud providers, third-party SaaS providers. And so when you start thinking about your data set, many of the organizations that I consult with, many of them don't really know where their data is from in and out, moving in and out of the organization. And so really understanding where all of your data is and making sure that we have a good handle on it is going to be really important. And then overall, really just putting governance frameworks in place to oversee the projects, including the roles and responsibilities in the decision-making processes. I do anticipate that probably over time, you're probably going to see an individual that's going to need to probably be assigned AI oversight within the organization. So this has been a little bit more of a topic of conversation in the industry. As a matter of fact, Senator Gary Peters is working on legislation that he just introduced in the state of Michigan, actually relevant to creating an AI officer role at the federal level. And so we're going to see probably more of that take hold. We're going to see more people probably needing to be responsible for AI within the organization and making sure that all the projects, all the policies, everything that we're following is staying aligned. And then lastly, really fostering a culture of transparency and accountability. This continues to be a big conversation within AI, is how do we ensure that AI is not being biased? How do we make sure that the data sets that we're feeding it are not biased? How do we govern privacy? How do we make sure that the security around the AI model is secure to make sure that it can't be tampered with? So there are a number of things that are having to be considered as you move up the stack and as you embrace more of the AI technology.
All right. Yeah. So next, it's really all about the business case. You need to identify, analyze, and evaluate the potential project. So you come up with a laundry list, understand where are your pains within your organization, identify potential projects that are out there. Then you really need to build that business case. And step two is do the thorough analysis, understand all the feasibility and all of the aspects associated with it. And then you need to prioritize. Once you have a list of several different opportunities, which ones are going to yield the best rate of return for you? And then really important at the tail end here is understanding the risks associated with it, because there are a lot of potential risks that Jessica already identified. And as you go out and start leveraging the artificial intelligence, there's going to be stuff that's going to crop up that you haven't anticipated. And so as she talked about with the continuous monitoring and looking for different aspects, real important to understand the risk that's there. So Mark, back to you.
Yep. So really at that point, now it's about how do we build this? How do we put it together? So obviously we want to make sure that the investment that we're making, we want to make sure that that AI investment is going to match or meet the business objective that we're trying to get to the end goal of. And so really having a clear project plan with measurable goals, it's very similar to what we would do in business on a regular form when we're implementing and doing projects in the organization. We want to follow that same process. We want to make sure that we've got good timelines, we've got milestones, we've got things that we can hit to make sure that we're returning the value to the business. If at any point along the way it appears that maybe those things may not be met, then those are times that we want to retool, kind of think about where we want to go next and make sure that it stays on point. Then at that point, we want to talk about securing the necessary resources. We want to get the budget, the talent, Jim kind of talked about that, getting the right people in the right seats that can help make this happen. You may need to partner up. You may need to work with other organizations that maybe have experience with some of the solutions that you might be looking at. They're going to be very important in that implementation phase as well. And then really making sure that you have good cross-functional collaboration within the organization. As you implement these tool sets, they will have reaching impact across multiple departments. So making sure you've got the right stakeholders at the table, making sure you've got the right conversations that are needing to be had at the strategic level, because when you begin with the end in mind, you may have to make some adjustments along the way with the technologies that you have in place, right? When we talk about assessing where you're at, some of that's going to feed into what are the changes or the additional investments that I may need to make that's going to be able to get us to where we want to get to with our AI investment. And then at that point, hey, we're ready to get started, execute on those, but then we want to monitor their progress. We want to adapt, and we want to make sure that continuous improvement, we're getting the success that we expected when we started the project.
Thank you,
Chip,
Mark.
back to you.
Yeah. So, in the end here, it's really a balancing act at this point, because if you invest too early, there's a lot of churn within the environment. I was at a Gartner conference just 2 weeks ago, and they were saying that 35% of a lot of the generative AI projects have already failed. And so they're expecting a high failure rate. And so the question is how soon should you get in, or how long should you wait? And if you wait too long, you could fall behind. So what we're basically saying is you want to move fast by taking your time, stay informed, and be cautious. And I heard this from somebody else here not too long ago. You want to think big, start small, and scale appropriately. So match that timeline that's going to mimic what's going on within the environment, as well as your capabilities to be able to go forward. So now what we're going to do is kind of take the crystal ball out here and kind of say, where are we headed, where are things going, and all the different things. And what we're looking at, and what we've been advising a lot of our clients here recently, is, again, we want you to start now. You need to start today. You can jump right in the pool with the generative AI. We've talked a little bit about the dealing with the general or the narrow AI and the steps that you can take with the AI maturity model. Some organizations may not be ready to do that yet, because first you really got to get after that data and understand it. So what we're saying is you want to do two things. You want to experiment with the generative AI. And, Microsoft's got the Copilot that's out there. You can leverage Gemini from Google. You can also do the ChatGPT, and we've talked about the other models that are out there. So that's one aspect in the near term. You want to do that. And then also at the same time, you want to start getting ready for that maturity model. And that's by first developing your AI policy, understanding the data governance, the data management, get your roadmap in place that we just kind of talked through. And then you can start moving up the chain and really get started with the descriptive as well as the diagnostic capability. So twofold. You can jump in the pool right now this afternoon and go straight into ChatGPT and start playing with it, and it can help you become more productive. And at the same point in time, develop that strategy and over the long term, and then go to the next aspect. Now, when we talk long term, what we're basically predicting is that the industries are going to start building what we call the large language models. Now, we didn't go into a lot of detail on those today. Again, we did do that in the first webinar. But what's going to happen is, for example, I read not too long ago that somebody was citing case law in court, and unfortunately, the case law was made up because of generative AI has a tendency to hallucinate. Now, that didn't go well for the attorney. But what the law groups are going to do is they're going to build a large language model based on case law. And then what we have at the very bottom of the bullet right here on the white side is the application interfaces. The ChatGPTs, the Geminis, whatever you're going to be leveraging are going to be able to make calls and say, go to my large language model and answer my question based on this question. So that's what's going to end up happening. So if you're in the plastics industry, if you're in the automotive industry, if you're in healthcare, everybody's going to start building these large language models. So that's one prediction we got. The second one is, and we've already seen this start, is a lot of the software vendors are building AI into their applications. Obviously, Microsoft's got a lead out there, but we know of several other players that are out there in the marketplace today that are planning on pulling in the ChatGPT into their equation. So our recommendation then basically is you want to stay tuned. We're going back to that balancing act. You want to get started, and you want to make sure that you get it, but you also want to wait until the AI matures a little bit. You're not going to miss out, but again, you don't want to wait too long because you can fall behind. And then your opportunity here in the long run is then to move up that maturity model again, starting with the descriptive, going to the diagnostic, and then eventually, I believe personally that a lot of the machine learning, the deep learning, and the big data, that's going to be made available to the middle and smaller markets as the technology matures, and there'll be vendors that'll be bringing it. So I think what we have to do is be a little bit patient, but we can get started today because this is a journey. It is a change in skill sets, and it's something as you build that roadmap, determine your strategy, you'll be able to go forward. So with that, at this point in time, what we can do is jump into Q&As. Do we have any questions that are out there? I haven't been able to get into the Q&A. Mark or Jessica, have you seen any questions that we can answer?
So there was one question out there from James Johnson, and he said, so Jessica, how can we prove that you are you?
I wasn't sure if that was an actual question or that was
I like that.
But that's a fair question, right? There was a recent story that came out where somebody joined a Zoom session, and everybody that was in the Zoom session was actually generated. And the person was not aware, and very interesting story. So this is part of the challenge, is that going forward, how do we detect the nuances of really the relationships to the people that we have? And I think that's a real thing that it's going to come down to, is it's going to come down to relationship, right? So when you know somebody, when you know their character, when you know their personality, when you know who they are, you're going to start to detect things that are uncharacteristic to the individual. And that's really going to be the things that are going to start to stand out. Obviously, for those of you that don't necessarily know Morgan Freeman, personally, could have been fooled by the deep fake that we showed earlier today. But I think, it's going to be important that we maintain those connections, those relationships. And we've got that familiarity with people. That's going to be a good way to help us detect if something's a little off.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just think about too, like unnatural body language or, even just like I said, taking that step back and listening, right. And really paying attention, to what you're seeing and what you're hearing. Goes back to the basics, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Apple's got those goggles that are out, and then they have the avatar. So if you're doing FaceTime and you've got your whatever I forget the name, what they're calling them, but I've seen people leverage the avatars, and Jessica, it kind of goes along with what you're saying, that the facial movements aren't quite there. It's
right.
it's pretty close, but it's a little different. The other thing is too, is I think that it's going to go back to determining the channel that you want to go to. So if you do have concerns and it's not feeling natural, you can always say, hey, let me call you right back. And then you've got the contact information for that person, or you've got the email, say, let me circle back to you and we'll get back to you to be able to do that. Because as the deep fakes go, for example, I've done a lot of research on like the voice cloning and all those things as we were doing a lot of this. And there's software packages out there, and I've got a list of like 10 of them, where you can go in right now today, sign up for the software package, and they'll have 50 different voices that you can leverage, and you can actually talk into the software package, and you can come out as Donald Trump, Joe Biden, anybody that you want, as far as the famous people from that vantage point. But the concern that I had, and actually I kind of thought it might be kind of fun to play with an audience and do that and actually demo it, but the software is free. And if you've ever heard the expression, if the software is free, you're the product, that always rings in the back of my mind. It's saying, okay, if I'm not paying for the software and it's out there and they've got a voice clip of me now, I have no control of what they're going to do with it. So we've kind of held off on that from that vantage point. I think we did get another question. Somebody's saying, what's the difference between AI and machine learning? I often get confused to the two. So machine learning, I can cover this really quick. And if you go back to the first webinar and watch the first webinar, you can get some detail on it as well. So machine learning is a subset of artificial intelligence. And basically what you do is you develop an algorithm, and you start feeding and training the algorithm based on what you want to do. So if it's narrow AI and you're very specific, let's say, for example, it's going to be Netflix, and you want to be able to predict what or provide to your end users to say, you like this, maybe you like that. What they start doing is they start training the model, and they leverage the algorithm and keep feeding it, and it gets smarter and smarter and smarter. So that's basically what machine learning is. And then I'll give you a little further step with it. Deep learning is basically larger data sets for the machine learning. So it takes it one step further. So instead of just having one algorithm, deep learning has several algorithms that have all been trained, and they pass through everything from the machine perspective. So hopefully that answers that question that we've got there. Do we have more, gang? They're asking a threat recommendation for the threat assessment tool and or AI threat education tools to share with their staff members. Jessica, Mark?
Yeah, absolutely. So we work with a lot of our clients from a threat assessment perspective. So would be happy to, if you have further questions, Courtney, would be happy to spend some time chatting with you about different threat assessments. Also, there's a number of different educational tools that are out there as well too. So again, feel free. I can shoot you a follow-up as well too, and we can talk through what some of those options look like as well too. So
Okay. Britt's got a question basically saying, let's see here, from long-term strategy provides a couple examples of APIs being built to supplement the lack of large language model capabilities. My recommendation would be is if you go out to ChatGPT, and they have the free version, and then they also have, I believe they call it the Pro, the paid version. If you go out there and if you go into it, you can look at all of the APIs that have already been built. So for example, ChatGPT is not really good at math. So people are building APIs out to other large language models that can do math better. So the answer would be is you go to the vendor of choice, and in there, they will talk about all the APIs that they have available and all the different calls that they have. And I know ChatGPT's got a ton of them that are out there today, and I haven't looked in probably 6 to 8 weeks, but that's where I'd recommend that you go. Mark or Jessica, any comments on that one?
Nope, that's exactly where my mind went as well. Yep.
Great. Great. We do have one last question from Tom. Do we have a sample AI policy? We do have a team that's available. So Tom, if you'd like, we could follow up and that team can talk to you. Actually, we have close to 30 questions that you should consider when you're developing an AI policy, and then as well as templates that have been built as well. And we've got a team behind that. Typically, we're not going to send out the template unto itself because you really need to think through a lot of these different aspects, and just grabbing something and putting it out in place isn't going to be as powerful. So that's pretty much where we're at this point. Any other further questions or comments? I think we're just about at the time that we're anticipating to shut things down.
I think the one thing that I'll just chime in on, which kind of ties back into the policy, is just to encourage those that are on with us today to make sure that they're working to establish some type of a corporate policy around AI. So as more and more users have access to this technology, somebody can subscribe to it personally. They could start using it to improve their work efficiency, making sure that you're aware and you've trained users on what is allowed and what's not allowed. So there's been plenty of reports of private, sensitive corporate information being uploaded into the public model. And we want to be very careful, right? Especially if we're dealing with sensitive data types. So absolutely dip your toe in the water, start to play with it, but please make sure you do have a corporate policy in place and make sure that you've got good training to go along with it as well.
Thank you, Mark. So kind of doing a quick recap then, we started off today with just a brief overview of the artificial intelligence, the big picture. Jessica spent a lot of time on risk, and that's because we think that's really important. As you open up the AI, you're going to open up the risks that are out there as well. A lot of good ideas there. Again, you can follow up with Jessica and her team based on that. And then Mark and I talked about the roadmap of basically figuring out where do you want to go, have your objectives, and then a process to be able to get there. And ultimately, again, what our prediction is that you could start with generative AI today and be able to look at customer, you can do marketing types of stuff. You don't have to build the large language model. Get started, start playing with that. And then also start your journey on that AI maturity model to be able to understand your data first, and then be able to move up those steps to do the descriptive, the diagnostic, potentially the predictive as well on down there. So thank you for coming today. Jessica and Mark, it's always a pleasure to work with you folks. And if you do have questions, please follow up with it. At this point in time, we're going to turn it over to Rena. And Rena, take us away.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Jessica. And thank you, Mark. And thanks to all of you for joining us today. Jim, as you were kind of summing everything up, I took note of think big, start small, and scale appropriately, you know, as a big takeaway from everything that we learned today. So thank you for all of the information. Just a couple of housekeeping notes. As Mark said in the beginning, we will be sending the recording out to you if you've registered. So you will get that recording in a follow-up email. We are unable to provide the PowerPoint, but you will have that content in the recording. If you were not able to participate in the part 1 of this series, we will also have a link to that recording as well, so you can catch up. And I also want to note that we have another webinar coming as part 3 in the final portion of this series, and that is coming up on April 24th. And that's going to be about finding the right tools. I know there were some questions in the chat about that. So join in on April 24th, and we'll dig deeper into finding the right tools and steps that you can take for your organization. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to our team. We are here and happy to help you. And then also just another note on what Jessica had mentioned earlier on, there will be also a follow-up resource that we've created for you from a risk standpoint, about 15 tips that your organization should be aware of. That will also be linked in the follow-up email. So if you don't check your email, I encourage you, check this one. It's going to be full of resources and a lot of ways that you can engage, especially based off of the information you learned here today. Thank you once again for joining, and we look forward to seeing you all on April 24th.